Hello there. This is my somewhat overdue prize video for Xenu. Xenu participated in a contest that I was hosting on my channel. He was the only participant actually, therefore he is the winner. And so this video is for him specifically. Xenu asked that I do a video comparing two films, Lost Highway, which was directed by David Lynch and came out in early *97, and Under the Skin, directed by Jonathon Glazer, that came out about 1 year ago now. Xenu considers both these movies to be what he calls puzzle films, and I'm not exactly sure how to define a puzzle film, except that it seems like a puzzle film would be kind of like a mystery movie with some sort of solution at the end, and that's not necessarily true for either of these movies. Lost Highway could be considered a puzzle movie if there were definitive answers to solving the puzzle. Under the Skin, however, is simply just something that's a little bit more mysterious. What I find these two films have in common is the way that they tend to withhold information and not spell out everything for the audience or for the viewer to understand everything clearly from beginning to end. They're a little bit more obscure than that. If you haven't seen either of these movies, I'll just describe them very quickly. Lost Highway, as I said, was directed by David Lynch. David Lynch co-wrote the script with Barry Gifford, and they collaborated on an earlier Lynch film called Wild at Heart from the novel Wild at Heart, which Barry Gifford was the author of. Barry Gifford also co-wrote the screenplay for City of Ghosts, which was directed by Matt Dillon. David Lynch, I'm sure most of you know, having created the TV series Twin Peaks as well as the follow-up film Fire Walk With Me. He's also responsible for Eraserhead, Mulholland Drive, Dune, quite a lot of obscure and cult-like movies. His style has been unique unto itself. Unfortunately, he hasn't made a film since the 2006 picture, with Laura Dern, Inland Empire, excuse me, Inland Empire. Laura Dern actually also appeared in Wild at Heart and Blue Velvet, which is one of David Lynch's most popular movies. The main characters are played by Bill Pullman, Balthazar, Getty, Patricia Arquette, with a few supporting turns by Robert Loggia, Natasha Gregson-Wagner, Gary Busey, Michael Massey, and Robert Blake. As I said, this movie came out in early 1997, and it is probably my favorite David Lynch movie, insofar as I could have a particular favorite David Lynch movie. It's the one that I like the best. By a strange coincidence, Under the Skin is also a movie that I like the best. I would consider it to be the best movie that I saw in 2014. I haven't actually come up with my list yet. It's in the process of being made right now. Under the Skin, however, was what I consider to be the most well-made movie of the ones that I saw last year. It was directed by Jonathon Glazer and co-written by Jonathon Glazer and Walter Campbell. It's based on a novel called Under the Skin by Michelle Faber, who also wrote the novel Crimson Petal and the White. The movie stars Scarlett Johanssen, of course, Jeremy McWilliams, Dougie McConnell, Paul Brannigan, and Adam Pearson. So before I continue any farther, I just want to talk a little bit about the fact that since this video is particularly for Xenu, I'm going to be talking about both of these movies in quite a bit of detail. And so if you haven't seen either of them, plan to, those are probably spoilers, so spoiler warning, I'm going to be talking about both of these movies in depth. So you'd best not watch this video until you've gotten around to seeing either or both of the movies that I'm going to be discussing here. So, so what do these movies have in common? Well, not a great deal, actually. They both deal with the otherworldly. In the case of Under the Skin, an extraterrestrial, some sort of non-human creature is the main character. And in Lost Highway, you have a sort of strange, twisted reality, in which reality is sort of bent out of shape partway through the movie and then bent back again. It's what some people refer to as a Mobius strip, in which the movie basically travels in a circle, but that circle becomes inverted halfway through. Things are turned upside down until it finally comes around and meets the beginning, in a sense. One thing that most of David Lynch's more strange films have in common is that they resist any kind of clear explanation. There is no definitive answer, oh, this is what everything means, oh, and this is what everything happens. There's a hint of the supernatural in a lot of his movies, particularly in this one and Fire Walk with Me. Things just can't be explained away by ghosts or by mental illness or time travel, what have you. When I first saw this movie in '97, I really liked it, and I formulated a theory about how the events played out in a realistic way, but it's not something that you can necessarily attribute to a number of David Lynch's movies. They resist any particular kind of explanation. You just sort of have to take them as they are. And sort of look at what you see rather than what you've learned or what your presumptions are about what's happening. You basically have to sort of forget whatever rules that you have established in your head about the way stories work and the way about certain situations work when dealing with a David Lynch movie. There's a similarity under the skin. There's nothing really supernatural about Under the Skin unless you consider the creature in the movie to be supernatural rather than simply an alien. This, of course, would be refuted by the novel. Michelle Faber actually has a name for the character, the main character played by Scarlett Johanssen, but in the film, no name is mentioned, and in the credits she's listed simply as the female. But what's different about this, of course, is that in the novel, it's explicitly stated that the main character is in fact an extraterrestrial, whereas in Under the Skin, that's not actually the case. They don't specifically say, you see what the creature truly looks like at a certain point in the film, but what you don't know is where it came from, or what exactly it's doing, and whether or not it's a supernatural entity, or whether or not it is an alien, is up for debate. Given everything, it's likely that it's an alien, but again, it's not something that's explicitly stated in any particular way. And with Under the Skin, again, it's a matter of just sort of... Under the Skin's one of those movies where you wouldn't necessarily immediately jump to the conclusion that you're dealing with an alien here until maybe about the halfway point in the movie, or maybe not even all the way until the end, because it's not like the character walks around narrating her own story and telling everyone, I'm an alien and I'm looking for men to pick up and harvest for their internal organs and fluids and what have you. That's not something that's ever stated. And so in that way it's similar to Lost Highway in the fact that there's no sort of summary, there's no exposition regarding everything that's happened or what's going to happen. You just sort of have to take each scene as it comes and each moment and each development as it comes and try and figure out for yourself what's happening. Let's go back to Lost Highway. The story begins with Fred, who's played by Bill Pullman. He's a jazz saxophonist, a musician. He lives in a Los Angeles house with his wife, Renee, who's played by Patricia Arquette. At a certain point in the movie, Fred is sent to prison, and while he's there on death row awaiting execution, for reasons unknown, he transforms into another character, this guy, a younger guy named Pete, who's played by Balthazar Getty. When the people who staff the prison discover this, they don't have any sort of suspicion about him having transformed from one convicted murderer into another person. They just think that this kid wound up in here accidentally, and they let him go back into the custody of his parents. A little strange development right there. Now, what we learn about this character, this new character, Pete, who's introduced about 40 minutes into the picture, is that he isn't simply some guy who changed from one person to the other and didn't know and thinks of himself still as that original character or has no memory. This character actually does have a history, and as the film plays out, it's hinted that he actually encountered the character played by Fred at some point earlier on in his life, exactly something involving a car accident perhaps. It's not explicitly stated. There are some theories about this, and that is, one of them in particular being that Bill Pullman, having been convicted of the murder of his wife, Alice, played by Patricia Arquette, was being pursued by the cops and was involved in an automobile accident involving Pete. And so the stories merge that way, except that events like that do not play out in the film do not play out that way in the film itself. We see a transformation, and we see Pete go about his business. He's living back at home with his parents. He goes back to work as an auto mechanic. He meets a woman who's also played by Patricia Arquette, but it's presumably a different character. Her hair color is different, and her history is different, and her associates are different. So it's a little difficult to sort of concretely say one character became the other character, or that one character developed a mental illness and imagined himself as this other character, or that the two characters collided and one of them died and the other one became the other person. It's all very, very vague. And of course things are made even more uncertain by the presence of the Robert Blake character, who doesn't really have a name that the characters know. He's simply identified as Mystery Man. And Robert Blake communicates with both of these characters in a way that suggests the supernatural, that suggests that this isn't simply a hallucination on the part of one character or the other. The fact that he is able to physically interact with them. At one point, actually, he hands a knife to one of the characters, at which point the character uses it to hurt another person. That's not something that a delusion could actually do. Of course, there is a possibility that the Bill Pullman character, Fred, is delusional, that he's imagining things, that he's disassociating himself from the reality of having killed his wife. But really, the movie resists any kind of easy explanation. Now, on the other hand, Under the Skin can probably explain rather easily, and I wanted to direct your attention to a link in the description. This is a review on the website called Letterboxd by Melissa Tamminga, who has some interesting insights into what happens in the movie, Under the Skin. I'm not sure if she's read the book or not. It's possible that she has. I don't recall exactly if she mentioned reading it or not, but she's got some very interesting ideas about how things play out in the film. And in Under the Skin, of course, we have the appearance of the Scarlett Johansson character, first basically pulling the clothes off of another woman and donning them, and then going out in her van around Scotland. I think it's Glasgow, I think, yeah, is where the film is set. And striking up conversations with solitary men who are walking around at night and inviting them to get into her van to drive them someplace. And on a number of occasions she drives men back to this house that she's staying in, at which point she leads them inside. And as they follow her in, she walks across this black surface. And as they walk across it, the man walking behind her, he doesn't stay on the surface. He sinks down below it and stays there. And it would seem at a certain point his internal organs disintegrate and are harvested for raw material for some unknown purpose. This is just only what we can accept. Since I haven't read the book, I don't know the details of why any of this is actually happening and what the ultimate goal is. But so again, with Lost Highway, you sort of have to, you know, because there's no companion novel, because there's no definitive explanation put out there by the creators of the movie as to what's happening and why, you sort of have to take each moment and each scene as it comes and piece it together for yourself. And it's the same with Under the Skin, the film in any case. Information is sort of doled out bit by bit, and you can come to a conclusion one way or the other about the intention of the character. But I think that despite its opaqueness, this is a more straightforward story than Lost Highway is. I'm a big admirer of this movie. I've seen a couple of Jonathon Glazer's earlier works. I didn't like them nearly as much as this one. Under the Skin I like a great deal. I think it's a really, really terrific movie. I'm also really impressed by the way so much of the film manages to be integrated in a way that I wouldn't have expected to be possible. With the encounters that Scarlett Johansson's character has with these men, my understanding is that several of them were filled with hidden cameras, and that these aren't actors that she meets, but actually, you know, guys who just happen to be happening by, and when she invites them in, their conversation is recorded. And of course, Scarlett Johansson's in character as this person who's looking for men to pick up. But at that point she sort of turns on her own charm and is very friendly and conversational and a bit flirtatious to put the guys at ease. They managed, it would seem, to have some of these guys actually film a follow-up scene in which they bring her which they come back to the house with her, but that's all sort of pre-staged and planned in advance, whereas the conversations in the truck, a lot of them aren't pre-planned. She just is sort of going with whatever they offer her. And she did a great job in the movie. Scarlett Johansson, actress, who I think has improved quite a lot over the years since I first started seeing her in films. One of my favorite films of hers is Match Point, but lately she's been doing really well. I'm not a big fan of Lucy, but in both the most recent Captain America movie and this one, she's doing quite well, and this is a terrific performance from her. Yes, I was very interested in this movie because I heard she'd be doing some nude scenes, and I was glad about that, but there's much to admire about the movie beyond that. That is all that I have on these particular movies right now. Again, I don't see a lot of similarities in the movie other than the fact that they're not, explicit in what's happening. I think they're both really good examples of movies in which you have to sort of forget about what you know, or what you know about the movie in advance may distract you from what's happening. That may not be the case in Under the Skin, but it's possible to go into Lost Highway with a lot of incorrect presumptions about what's going to happen, what you're going to see. But I think a lot of films benefit from knowing less, or at least avoiding false information or misinformation about what's happening. I'm reminded of a couple of reviews I read of a movie that Bill Paxton directed about 10 or 11 years ago called Frailty. And in the reviews, they stated, the writers said that Matthew McConaughey is playing a character who claims to be Fenton Meeks, claims to be named Fenton Meeks. And instead of simply saying Matthew McConaughey plays a guy named Fenton Meeks, this sort of clued me into the fact that McConaughey's character was pretending to be somebody that he wasn't, and so I had that information way before that comes out in the film itself. So that was a little disappointing. I wish that critics would be more careful about imparting information like that. Of course, if they were to say anything else, it could be considered false. But with Under the Skin, of course, I went in knowing that Scarlett Johansson's character was in fact an alien, whereas if I'd gone in not knowing that, I would have had to piece it together from what I saw. The strangeness of the environment that she's living in, the whole weirdness involving her pulling clothes off of a girl and putting them on herself, and then the whole organ harvesting thing, and of course when her mask, her human form skin comes off in the end, you see what she actually looks like. Well, there's a big clue right there that she isn't human. But yeah, that's something that I wouldn't have necessarily guessed right away if I didn't have that information in advance. I hope you like this video, Mr. Xenu. I enjoyed talking about both these movies very much. I think that they're both quite good. I've been a fan of Lost Highway for quite some time. And it is more or less my favorite David Lynch movie. And Under the Skin is more or less my favorite Glazer film at this point, although he's only made 3 so far. He has made a number of music videos, but I can't recall exactly which ones. Anyway, that is my video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks to the rest of you who watched. I hope that you found this interesting, and I'll see you again. I'll be having to make a video pretty soon on my top movies list of 2014. Thanks again.